out exactly where their raw materials come from. And most of the time, we're involved in what's called responsible sourcing, helping brands ask their suppliers, helping the suppliers map out exactly where raw materials are being mined or harvested, and helping to mitigate some of the long-standing risks that we see in global supply chains, risks to reputation, risks tied to deforestation, child labor, other major social environmental issues. However, every few years we get called upon because of a series of disruptions in supply chains that actually spun out of MIT right after the tsunami in Japan. And we've moved to New York when Sandy caused all sorts of disruptions to the supply chains in the city. And so I just want to share stuff that's a little bit too fresh to have a deck prepared, but it's just effectively what we do when companies say, hey, we haven't been mapping our supply chain as deep as we would have liked to, but we know that you have the tools to do that, and what can you do to help us mitigate and manage and go beyond this period of disruption. And so the tool I'm showing you is actually this software right here, where we basically, when you're not busy traipsing through palm oil plantations to see if there's deforestation, you can very quickly find out exactly how much you depend on various suppliers, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 in your supply chain, how much value is actually held up by every one of your suppliers. And it's a combination of whether they can be replaced, how much inventory they have, how quick it is to get them back up and running after a disruption. And very recently, we were able to take advantage of all the great work that Johns Hopkins is doing around real-time mapping of COVID-19, include a risk score for the pandemic that anybody having mapped their supply chain can overlay on the raw material, but also manufacturing, distribution, and customers, so that they can in real time manage exactly where the impact is coming and going. And just to wrap up real quickly, although we're helping a lot of companies now deal with the fluctuations in demand, anticipating which parts of the world are going to be opening up, which ones are not yet ready to, we also know that raw material sourcing countries, the global south, in particular, West Africa, South Asia, and some parts of Central America, are going to feel the impact of the pandemic later than a lot of the demand side of these supply chains. And so managing that risk as it starts to affect those raw material sourcing countries where everyone's raw materials come from is super important, especially because while it's easy to get on Zoom, get online with your partners and make sure that they are okay, that they have all the social infrastructure they need to get through the pandemic, it's not as easy when you're dealing with tropical commodities. And so we're there to help with that. The same tools that we do to make sure there are no children in the fields, you can use to make sure there's enough PPE at the warehouse that you might have that's shipping raw materials to you. So transforming the business in times of need into a real-time crisis response and management platform.
Thank you, Leo. And by the way, we started the live streaming maybe a couple of seconds after you started. So just going to repeat a few things for those who just joined us. So my name is Haib Haddad, and with Calvin Chen, my partner at E14 Fund, we're going to be co-hosting this first panel, second panel of E14 Live around the future of supply chain, covering the second order effect of the pandemic, where in the first one a few weeks ago, we covered the first order through the effect on the swab delivery and PPE production through some of the companies that actually stepped up to produce that, but also on future of work, and people are working with that. And Leo, I have one quick question for you. The data that you have currently in the platform that you've been assembling over time, where has that come from, and what has the use case of that data changed over time?
Yeah, look, there are two kinds of data. One is we help maintain an accurate picture of each company's day-to-day supply chain, and that's coming from crowdsourcing, data mining, and a lot of supplier data. The other one is all of this data that's thankfully being made available through Johns Hopkins and others on where the pandemic is growing in severity, where it's receding, and also where various lockdowns might be impacting any point along the chain. So it could be raw material. It could be distribution, could be a logistics bottleneck, and that's coming available through a variety of resources, including on GitHub. And it's something that we can integrate directly with the SAP data from our customers' supply chain databases.
Great, thanks, Leo. Next up, we have Matt Reynolds from Thruwave. Matt, if you could introduce Thruwave and talk a little bit about the implications on supply chains from COVID.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Matt Reynolds from Thruwave. We're based in Seattle, Washington. Hang on a second while I share some slides here. So our posture in the supply chain is giving our customers visibility into packaged goods. So we work with retail and physical and e-commerce retail customers that are shipping items to their customers. And what I like to say is that we enable X-ray vision. We actually use human-safe millimeter waves to look inside outbound packages and figure out important statistics like how many items are there, detect missing or damaged items, and determine critically how efficient the shipping process is. So just as an example of what we do, the left-hand side here, this is a corrugated carton containing some product. On the right-hand side, this is what our sensor shows. This turns out to be a case of shampoo, and you can see the bottles there and their little necks, and then critically, all of the unoccupied airspace around the product. What this looks like in real time is we work with customers that have packaged goods going down conveyors. Those packaged goods pass by our sensors, and in real time, as the products move through, we acquire 3D images of the products. And then, as you see here, we can dimension and find the efficiency with which those items are packed. And so the two trends that we see with our customers are really around consumer behavior. And I think they're going to be sticky. So one of them obviously is growth in e-commerce across all categories. And that extends beyond the traditional dry goods into grocery and fresh items. And the second trend that applies more in the physical retail space is an acceleration of the trend toward buy online, pick up in store. And we expect that both of those trends, which were in place before the pandemic, are really going to be, are accentuated during this time. And we think that that's going to be sticky. We think that consumer behavior is going to change. And from our perspective, in the work that we do with shipping efficiency, with item counting, and so forth, as more of retail commerce moves online, there's going to be an increasing need for automation. That's already a trend that's been happening, but certainly the availability of human labor to do pick and pack operations is limited now and continue to be limited in the future. So those are the things that are happening that we're aware of. Our customers right now are operating in peak mode. They're shipping as fast as they can, and they're packing as fast as they can. And that's limited by labor. There's a drive toward automation, and we're part of that.
Thanks, Matt. Just a question before we move on. How do you see operating in this peak mode? How do you see data really driving action and response to the need for automation or the need for efficiency?
Sure. So our customers are some of the largest in e-commerce and retail fulfillment, and they're tracking everything. So they measure everything from the flow of goods in their facilities to the efficiency of the labor that's doing pick and pack operations. Those things are timed down to sub-second level. They have enormous throughput, and so it's all driven by data inside their operations. I think where things get fuzzy is the boundary between suppliers and those retail channels. So if you have a manufacturer that's delivering goods and they have a late shipment, that information is often made available only when a deadline is missed. And so that's a critical issue in this space.
Thanks, Matt. And next we'll move to Ali. Ali Kamil is the CTO at Y Systems, another Media Lab spinoff, and in fact one that has, I think, 4 co-founders from the Media Lab, at least met at the Media Lab from different parts of MIT. So Ali will walk us through Y Systems.
All right, thank you, Habib. Hi everyone. My name is Ali. I'm the co-founder and CTO at Y Systems. So today, I just wanted to tell you a little bit more about what we do at Y Systems here. So we provide what we call autonomous dispatch and routing capability for any company that's in the business of delivering goods, providing services, or moving people. So we provide the end-to-end platform for them to plan their routes and then execute them. So our product platform includes a cloud-based application where the dispatchers can plan their routes. Let's say you're Coca-Cola, you have 10,000 stops in the city of Boston. What's the most optimal way to deliver that? So the system will consider all these constraints and give you an optimal plan. And then we provide a mobile application for drivers to be able to conduct and manage the deliveries in the field. And this is what the plan would look like. For example, if a dispatcher is planning their day, let's say today in downtown Boston, what's the most optimal way to do that? And the driver can have a real-time view of where they're in the field, conduct the deliveries, accept payments, provide real-time visibility for customers, as well as ability to get e-signatures and conduct contactless delivery, which has become a big just come in as a big need for certain times. So this is deployed across. We have deployed we've conducted over 5 million deliveries in the past year, greater than 75 customer locations, and over 5,000 users, 5,000 drivers in the platform. So that's a brief, quick overview about Wise. But what I wanted to spend a little more time about is what we are seeing with COVID-19. And this is a quick graph of what we started seeing, and the trends are really relevant here, because since end of March, we have seen the number of orders and fulfillment orders, a number of deliveries that are conducted with consumers have almost doubled in the last month and a half. And this trend started out in Singapore, and we started seeing that, just early signs of that in around end of February, where we saw that the higher orders or higher fulfillment requests are coming in. And when you look at the dispatchers, they are currently the on-premise software. The dispatchers this is what the dispatchers are doing. They're planning their day for tomorrow, or planning they're in this operations center and planning for tomorrow. But with the cloud-based solution, they're able to do that from home. So that's what a lot of our companies who plan their routes and for these last mile operations, they can do that from home. So we have been able to do that for dispatchers and drivers. So just to quickly wrap up, and similar to what Matt mentioned earlier, that we are seeing the surge in demand. We saw that the results are almost unbelievable for almost a month and a half in terms of business to consumer delivery. The surge in demand in terms of high volume of requests that are coming in. There is an increased need for dynamic routing, which is we are also seeing driver absenteeism for various reasons, and that leads to dynamically adjusting your routes, assigning a different driver to whom a route was for the last year or 2 years was probably conducted by the same driver. Now you have to assign it to another driver, and the more and more orders that are coming in, so there's a higher need for dynamic routing. Fulfillment numbers are higher, which is everyone's at home, so we saw a spike in like a really unprecedented successful number of deliveries that were conducted with the customers who were at home. And then contactless deliveries is also here to stay, I feel. So there's been an uptick in usage of e-signatures and real-time tracking, and also customers asking for a particular slot for delivery as well. So yeah, that's went through it pretty quickly, but open for questions. Yeah.
Thanks, Ali. That's great. Are you seeing also some interesting behavior changes around maybe skipping distribution centers altogether, or things like are the systemic changes that you're seeing with the routes itself, not just about the route from point A to point B, but even in between, things changing, unloading one truck to another, or things like that? Is that something that you're seeing in from your customers?
So we are not. So we are routing mostly. The trends are last mile distribution. So the middle mile has stayed pretty constant when we look at the goods moving from a warehouse to a last mile distribution center. So we haven't. I think that I think as mentioned earlier, there's a surge in demand in terms of the operations and how goods are moving between the warehouse to distribution center. For last mile, we are seeing the higher need for drivers, and that more delivery drivers are required. We also saw a surge in meal kit delivery. So we have a few customers in the meal kit delivery space, so especially in the big cities.
A quick follow-up to that, one of the things you didn't mention in your presentation is the data points that are used to optimize this last mile, even 100 meters, as you guys call it. There's lots that go into that, and it's not just about the route and the traffic, and there's a lot of data points that you've been optimizing by really focusing on the driver first. Tell us more about that and how you're seeing that today actually coming back into effect.
Yeah, so that's fantastic. So the last few feet is what we try to optimize in terms of trying to understand the behavior of the driver and the customer location as well. So when the driver approaches the customer space, especially in Singapore, one of our customers, where you go in, the driver has to find parking, then there is unload point that needs to happen. Then there are steps the driver has to walk to a certain location where the drop-off needs to happen. Usually there would be a signature that would be required from a customer. But nowadays we're seeing these e-signatures that have emerged, where there's a connection between the customer application that we also provide, where the customers can track the delivery, and when the driver arrives, so there is a virtual handoff that happens between the driver and the customer. So that's something that we have enabled, something that we have brought to fore in the last month. With that. So that's where the last few feet learning around last few feet has enabled us to do that. We use a mobile application to track the location of the driver, as well as how long each step of the process takes.
Thanks. Calvin, you want to take us through the first question that came through Slido?
Sure. So this is to the whole group. Anyone want to jump in? What do you think are some of the existing risks and vulnerabilities in supply chains that the pandemic has exposed? And to what extent do those create new opportunities?
I can take this one just to start quickly. We are getting a lot of direct-to-consumer brands and a lot of very lean operations that have come to us that have been basically working entirely through a few contract manufacturers, and so they have great contact with their customers. They've survived because they have direct distribution, but they don't know who supplies their suppliers, and so the old weakness that comes up is if the contract manufacturer has all of a sudden been called off to do something else, like make hand sanitizer, there's no bandwidth for them to make sure that the raw materials are still coming in the door quickly enough. So I'd say it's underscored that you can't just focus on the sales part of your business. You actually have to know a lot more about the indirect parts of your supply chain, your sourcing.
Does that mean there are some necessary trade-offs that I think about resiliency and going upstream and being robust versus kind of the pure pursuit of efficiency, which is kind of predicated supply chains in the past?
Yeah, I think that would have been the case these days, getting your supply chain mapped, and then if something happens, quickly pinging everybody to get a pulse on whether they're able to maintain capacity and what need they have for any kind of assistance. It's become almost automated. You just have to use a software platform like Sourcemap to do that. So yeah, in fact, if you had to get on the phone, this would not be a good time to try to get everybody's attention. But if you could get them signed up into a supplier social network, then it's something that you can do while maintaining that lean operation.
Great, thanks.
Matt, a question for you on some of the change in behaviors that you're seeing within your customers that have been accelerated during the pandemic, but you think that you think will stick post, and some of them that you think are just going to be a phase and they'll go away.
Sure. So certainly, one of the effects is a change in the what's called the high velocity item mix. So the items that are flowing through at the highest throughput. Right now, that's cleaning supplies, right? Nobody can keep those things in stock. So that's something that I think is more of a transient, right? That's directly responsive to the nature of the pandemic and what consumer demand is driving. But I think the behavioral change is the thing that's more likely to be sticky. So I think as people get used to changing the product mix that they do order online, either for e-commerce delivery or for in-store pickup, particularly around fresh items, that's a case where, historically, a lot of people have wanted to pick their own vegetables from a tray. They may become comfortable with having their supplier select those items for them and make them available by pickup. And of course, the big players in this space know that they want that to be sticky, and they're doing their best to supply the highest quality product that way. But I do think that's going to be definitely a permanent change in demand pattern. I certainly have started ordering veggies for store pickup, and I've been happy with what I've received.
Maybe the next one for Ali. Has this pandemic and the change in customer behaviors affected, your product roadmap and the features that Y Systems either has prioritized from the existing product as you communicate with customers, or maybe some of the exciting features that you think customers really need in the near term?
Yeah, I think we have been fortunate, and again, this is of course a human tragedy, but we have been fortunate to be in an industry or at a position where we haven't had to change our roadmap too much. Our focus has been on dynamic routing, providing the capability for uncertain times. We have always, the premise has been that last mile is unpredictable, things change. How do you handle how do you build that resilience within your operations to be able to conduct those deliveries on time and be more efficient and provide excellent customer service? So, for example, as I mentioned, like dynamic routing, ability to conduct and assign to a new driver when you have been doing a certain, like same driver going to a certain location, the static routing capability that most like existing operations were doing. We brought for the ability to do dynamic routing, finding the best driver for the number of deliveries that you need. So that is one aspect that we were already doing for the last couple of years. Other was we had a customer real-time tracking capability as well as a driver application where the customer could track and receive the delivery and do a virtual handoff that could happen. That already existed where the customer can accept that, say, oh yes, I have received the delivery, and doesn't have to be there if you can verify that the package was delivered or placed in the right place. So that was another aspect. That was like another one was real-time notifications and the whole ability for customers to schedule their own delivery window. So find out what's the best time, given everyone's working from home, what's the best time to deliver, receive groceries or receive their product. So we didn't have to, we have been fortunate, we didn't have to change our roadmap too much here. If anything, we had to accelerate just onboarding customers. So that has been customers where we have, as I mentioned, there are more meal kit delivery that has been coming, as well as more and more customers are wanting more drivers to be on.
A follow-up on that, Ali, actually, and for you and for the other panelists as well, is are you seeing on the customer side, are you seeing companies right now, new clients jumping in and wanting to adopt new technologies that allow them to add efficiency and optimize, in your case, for last mile delivery? Or are you seeing people just double down on what they already know, and because it's so much chaos and so much panic that they just can't really digest yet another tool, and they're just focusing on what they know, but what they know might not be the best. How are you thinking, how are you seeing the behavior, and specifically also maybe on the role of the CIO, on the role of the innovation people on the corporate side, that usually their role has been to bring in new technology to the company. Are you seeing even their job change as well as an impact of the pandemic?
Yeah, so it depends on the type of company, right? So we are seeing like a smaller meal kit delivery companies. We have seen them take on or like use Y systems a lot. So then the last month and a half, we have seen a lot of these companies emerge and want to accelerate their roadmap to be able to provide these meal kits or provide this restaurant delivery in the localized versions of DoorDashes and Postmates of the world. And we saw that globally, not just here in the US. So they're investing, they're using Y systems to be able to do that. So because they don't have to build their last mile mobile application for drivers, so they can get up and running tomorrow if they wanted. From the existing companies, the large distribution enterprises, we have seen the movement towards dynamic routing. So that's where they were, they're used to doing certain way of doing things. Now they're moving towards a more dynamic because they don't have the drivers. They have high demand. So there is more need for do all these deliveries. They had these territories where they would deliver only on a Wednesday and a Friday, but now they have to go there every day, and to be able to have the drivers and to be able to build those routes dynamically. So that has accelerated the move towards dynamic, so existing customers. And coming to your last point, where I think in general, I do see I think this accelerating the trend towards digitization. I think there's more trends towards like using some of these tools out there that will enable you to, as I mentioned, some of the existing route optimization providers, they're on-premise, so it requires them to be in the office to be able to plan the routes for tomorrow. But through a cloud-based solution, you can do that from home. That's what we have enabled our dispatchers to do. So I do see a larger trend towards moving towards digitization.
Matt,
maybe to build off that, a little bit, Matt, how do you think about engaging with customers in this shelter-in-place environment with social distancing? There may be the need, they may want to move towards automation or the efficiency as Ali is describing, but how do you actually demo a product? How do you build working relationships, and how do you demonstrate customer value?
Yeah, so we've adapted. We certainly have moved toward more use of Zoom or video conferencing as a way to introduce ourselves to customers. We've set up kind of a demo center at our own facility that can be operated by one person at a time. And so when we talk with a new customer and they have a different type of product and they're interested in seeing how our system performs on their particular product, we have them ship an example of their product to our facility, and we'll run it live on Zoom. So myself or one of our BD folks will actually run our system live with a conveyor from our facility, where we might normally do that in a customer facility if that's not feasible because of travel limitations or social distancing. Most of the time we can accept product in and then just run it in our own facility and then do it live via video. And I think customers understand that. The larger question is when they will be out of peak mode. And that's probably a $500 billion or $1 trillion question. But I think that's the real question, is when what the staged return to normalcy looks like, and how do automation plans fit into that staging. That is very much TBD.
Matt, I'd like to ask you the same question I asked Ali as well. I mean, at Thruwave, the sensors that you're building have this unique capability of seeing through boxes. And on top of that, you're building the software layers on the analytics, on making sure that there's no errors, there's no wrong shipments, no shipments of air, therefore saving your customers lots and lots of money. So it's only natural to anticipate that within this pandemic, you're seeing a pressure from your customer demand. But again, are you seeing customers that are coming into you are those who already have had the path towards digitalization, as Ali said, or is it really, you know, a mixed bag? Who would be the perfect first early adopters, or the new early adopters post COVID, if you want? Are you seeing a different categorization there?
Well, I think there's certainly going to be a drive toward automation in industries that historically haven't been as automated. You know, we've been focusing on customers who have established automation programs, and you know, for us, you know, that's just a better fit because you know, we're part of an overall solution. We're not building out entire distribution or fulfillment centers. But you know, I do think that's going to change. I think that everybody is very the pandemic has refocused everybody's attention on human labor. You know, obviously the advantage of human labor is that it's very resilient and can be repurposed very easily. But of course, the downside is, you know, people get sick and machines don't. And, you know, some of the things that have been historical drivers of efficiency or historical efficiency metrics, like you know, the number of lines that can be supported in a distribution center of a certain size. You know, automation enables those lines to be packed much more closely than with people, even in healthy times. So you know, I think those are long-term trends. I think, you know, figuring out how to deal with the current spike is the immediate problem, and then you know, we're going to see some long-term changes in behavior, both from the consumer side and then also from the perspective of the supply chains.
Thanks, Matt. And Leo, maybe to throw it over to you, how do you see transparency and automation working together? And similarly, do you see customer appetite, you know, strong right now, or are people just kind of trying their best to keep their heads above water?
I think that on the downstream side, which Matt and Ali know the most about, I think that everyone is moving towards as much of a distributed and automated system as possible. On the raw materials, actually what we're seeing is a scramble as industries consolidate. It was already the case that all the raw materials we map for customers are, you know, fully sold out every year. I mean, we never have a surplus of agricultural or mined materials, and it just seems like right now those companies that can afford to are digging deeper into that raw material supply chain. So we've actually picked up quite a bit of business because as consolidation happens, the fight for those raw materials is going to intensify, and people are going to need to come out of this depression with a much firmer handle on how they're going to keep their business going. So this uncertainty has actually opened up the competition over raw materials, and the best way to be sure you'll get the raw materials is to have, since you can't have feet on the ground, is to have, you know, the satellite monitoring, the relationships, the remote teleworking, the same way we do it right now, to have that also with the first mile of the supply chain. So it's actually getting to be quite a heated time for raw materials.
Hey, Leo, another question for you. You started by hedging the risks of climate change, and you know, thinking also a bit. I mean, sustainability as a first point. Do you think that's the, you know, do you see that risk from where you're working? That's the next bigger pandemic that's coming our way in the near future? I know it's a very, very big question we're asking you, but from where you stand and where you're working with your own customers, is that something that people are starting to think about and be much more worried about as well?
You know, certainly, I mean, as soon as everybody realizes just how dependent we are on very concentrated parts of the world to either manufacture or grow or mine materials that everyone uses, you realize that, you know, a flood, a drought, just a fluctuation in temperature will have huge impacts on the price of those raw materials and sub-assemblies. So I do think that people are, if they weren't mapping their supply chain in anticipation of climate change and as a sort of responsible sourcing approach, now they're mapping their supply chain just to get by, just to make sure they can keep operating. And so it's become a matter of business continuity. And I think that's going to dovetail when we've seen our customers, even if they didn't want to think about climate change, when they started mapping, as soon as they realized just how vulnerable some of those sourcing and even manufacturing regions are to severe weather and to issues like overcrowding and food insecurity, the more they get invested in trying new kinds of remediation solutions.
Thanks, Leo. We have another question from Slido asking about the revenue impact on each of your businesses. It sounds like, for each of your businesses, you might be some of the few that have actually done relatively well during this pandemic, but maybe you could respond to that question or put it in a larger context. Obviously this is a global human tragedy, but what are some of the points for optimism for your own business or for society from this? You want to each take a turn at that one? Matt, you want to go first?
Sure. From our perspective, we're going to see a substantial increase in revenue this year, and I think part of that is definitely due to increased emphasis on automation, and then the other part of it is just from our own perspective, ability to continue the the BD work remotely. Is something we've been able to do. We've been able to keep our engineers busy, working primarily remotely, and then working in shifts in the lab when they're doing hardware work. So I think for us, this is actually if we can keep our staff and our customers healthy, this is going to be a fine year. But we know that our customers have challenges, and the general public have challenges, and I guess we're trying to figure out the best ways to support our customers and make sure that as needs arrive, we can work quickly to meet them.
Thanks, Ali.
Yeah. Well, I'm a technology optimist by nature, so I do think I think the movement towards digitization is going to continue. I think as we have seen. There's more and more need for that, and we have been fortunate to be positioned in an industry, in a space, and solving the problems that have become critical during this time. So in terms of just pure revenue numbers, we have been doing okay. We've seen a surge in demand, surge in uptick from business to consumers, especially business to consumers. We did see companies who have stopped operations. Again, they want to continue with us, but stopped operations when they're delivering to restaurants, since restaurants are closed. So that was an area, a small subset of the business that we were impacted by. But overall, I do think this year's just pure revenue numbers, we're going to be doing okay. We're growing the team.
Thanks. And Leo, some notes of optimism?
Yeah, I mean, this is a good time to be, I guess, in the supply chain business, right? So unfortunately, we've seen a lot of softening in retail and apparel, which are two industries that we do touch on. But if anything, that's meant that they need to find ways to run their extended supply chain more automatically with less manual effort. But overall, if somebody wasn't mapping their supply chain 6 months ago, they're definitely trying to do it now. So if anything, we're seeing significant growth in business now with the companies we already started working with and their partners. And in the next 6 to 12 months, we're going to see everybody who didn't have a mitigation plan in place start to map their supply chain like they've done in the past as well after other disruptions. So I think it's tough, but everyone is realizing they need to have better digital solutions and automation in place to weather this and the future storms.
Thanks, Leo. And for the last question, we thought we would ask you to say something for the folks who are listening in, something about your product, especially those who could become customers or partners with you. what would you like? How would you like that? Who would you like for them to reach out to you, and what would you like to tell them that you're ready to help with in the next few months? So that's your opportunity to sell.
I can start. You know, we're seeing a lot of companies come to us that are just confused and not sure where to go first, and to try to figure out their supply chain and how to keep it running. So in response, we've just beefed up our support staff, because we're seeing that there are people who just, you know, this is not the time to start a new innovation project or an IT integration. This is the time to map out what you have, find out exactly where the risks are, and then enable you to get in touch with your suppliers and your partners that may be in difficulty. So if anything, we've put out a high touch effort to just walk people through the steps, hold their hand, and make sure they can quickly get the risks under control. So if you need any help mapping your supply chain, just let us know, and we'll send our analysts to you via Zoom.
Yeah, I can go next. I mentioned earlier, we are working with actively working with commercial fleets. Any commercial fleet that wants to provide delivery services from business to consumer, business to business even. And I think Leo put it right. There's not time for innovation, but there is a time for digitization, and that's where we have seen customers investing more and more their resources and capabilities to move towards that dynamic routing capability, dealing with surge in demand, dealing with the like unpredictable supply or availability of drivers, and how you can better optimize your operation. So cost cutting is one where we help our customers in terms of getting more efficiency, as well as providing greater customer service and more digital services for your customers. So meaning that if you're delivering to a customer, they can track the delivery, they can provide an e-payment, they can provide an e-signature. So we'd love to help any company that wants to do that.
Thanks, Hari. Matt?
Sure. So, you know, we would like to speak with customers that are interested in inbound and outbound efficiency in terms of item count, void space minimization, shipping efficiency across the manufacturing, e-commerce, and retail supply chains. So we typically would work with people in the ops organization at each of those types of companies, and we would be happy to talk, and we can make progress. You know, even though you know, we'll be doing it remotely from our lab.
Thanks, Matt. It's worth noting that you know, we've been in touch with all of our companies, including you, and we've been extremely impressed by not just how you've been thinking about the future and helping your customers and new customers, but most importantly about how you've been working with your teams. First and foremost, it's about being a human and the human touch, and how you've been quickly to adapt your working style, putting safety measures, thinking about the safety of the team, making space as well for different issues that might arise. And because we're living in new normal, and as founders and as entrepreneurs, you've been very quickly to adapt, not just on the product and the marketing and the opportunity side, but first and foremost on the team side. So I just want to make sure that we commend you all on that, and thank you for it.
Thanks, everyone. And we've gone a little bit over time, and I apologize to everyone who posted questions to Slido. We didn't have time to get through all of them. If you have any specific questions for any of the three companies that shared with us today, or with E14 Fund, we invite you to just reach out to us. We're available to connect you or to do our best to answer those questions. And we look forward to getting together again for the next E14 Live. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.